Yeah, we're not doctors or giving any medical advice. This show is intended for educational purposes only, and you should talk to your doctor about any medical issues. Now, let's get at it.
Welcome to Chat the Fat, where nutrition authors Nissa Gron and TC Hale are going to break down common low-carb mistakes. Let's chat all things low-carb, keto, digestion, and more so you can maximize your results.
Hello, good people, and welcome back to Chat the Fat. This is episode 81. I'm TC Hale, and I'm here with Nissa Gron, but I'm also here with Candace and Bree and Sasha and Denise. I'm here with all kinds of people because extra people showed up today. We didn't even know they were coming. What is going on?
We did know they were coming because we invited all of our Keto Challengers and Keto Decoded members to come join us for our first ever live podcast.
Which translates into train wreck. That's what we'll have today. It's going to be a fun train wreck.
Let's hope not.
But the challenge so far has not been a train wreck. There's some people kind of rocking the house.
Yeah, we've had amazing results. I'm pretty sure, just like we promised, it was our biggest challenge yet. Those week one results, all of the challengers combined lost 160.9 pounds, which is more than I
Each.
not each, but
That would have been really good.
Even all combined, because it's more than a lot of our challengers actually weigh. So they're losing people in there.
Right. Yeah. We've lost more than just like a third grader. We've lost like construction workers.
Yes, we have.
So it's very exciting, and it's really fun to see everybody seeing such great results. But there's also been people that saying, "Oh, what about this? Why is this better? This is working better." And it's not even just about the weight loss; it's about a lot of other things. So that's a whole lot of fun.
Yes, we're more than about weight loss. Actually, weight loss is kind of the last thing we focus on, even though it's the challenge and someone's going to win a big prize for losing weight. That's kind of the end result of all these other great things that are happening.
Right. So during the challenge, we try to do a couple of videos each week, one or two each of us between me and Nissa. And so today we decided, well, we're going to record a podcast, and these topics that everybody are asking about are really good topics for a podcast for everybody to get to hear about. So instead of doing our video live in just the group with our members and challengers, we're going to do it on the podcast. So everybody gets to hear these questions that we're answering and the topics that we're covering.
Right. And then were you going to start with the anabolic catabolic question today?
Right. So that was, I think it was Kelly Ray and Candace and maybe a few other people. They were wanting to know more about the anabolic catabolic imbalance and why does that always confuse me? And I'm listening to what you're saying, but my head is still exploding. And so we just kind of want to simplify this a little bit and explain that. And then we'll follow up with some questions regarding that imbalance. And then we'll do other questions too. And this might go over 2 episodes. Who knows? I don't know if you guys have noticed, but Nissa noticed that I ramble sometimes. I don't know if that's true or if that's just her making stuff up.
I would correct that and say all the time, not
Oh,
sometimes.
okay. Okay. So I was wrong.
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, let's just look at what this is. And when we're talking about the anabolic and catabolic imbalance, we're just talking about different imbalances that we teach people to look at their physiology and doing just simple self-tests that you can do at home using tools you can pick up at a pharmacy or a drugstore, and just getting an idea of how your body is operating. So when we look at those numbers, we kind of look at them all together, and it helps us figure out imbalances that may be going on in the body that are making things harder or creating symptoms or making it hard to lose weight. And we kind of look at, okay, does this person seem to be mostly just burning carbs, or do they have the ability to burn fat as well? Or maybe they're all burning fat and they can't burn carbs at all, and every carb they eat is getting stored as fat because they can't burn it. So we look at things like that. And we also like to figure out this anabolic catabolic imbalance. So what this is just um, our cells. We have cells in our body, right? So these cells kind of go back and forth between states, and one of the states is an anabolic state, and we've heard that word before when we refer to anabolic steroids. That's kind of the only time most people hear that word. But this anabolic state is the state that happens at night. And that just means that our body is moving into this state of, hey, it's time to rest, go ahead and sleep. And while you're doing that, we're going to do all these rebuilding and repairing processes. And so the state is very appropriate. We want that state to happen. And then during the day, we move into a catabolic state. And that's the state where the body is awake. It's better at creating energy. Um, it happens while we're active so that we can be active and we can stay awake and do all the things. So that catabolic state is very appropriate. We want that to happen too. Neither of these things are bad. So in the catabolic state, the body will also break down tissues and cells and all these things, because we all know that the body kind of regenerates itself. We know that within a couple of years, like every cell in the body has been regenerated into a new cell, and it's all new. So that's how the body does that. It breaks it down during the day, and then at night it builds things back up. That's pretty much it. You don't have to make it a whole lot more complicated than that. It's just wakey wakey time and sleepy sleepy time. You can call it that if you want to, and you can say, hey, I have a sleepy sleepy time imbalance. Um, so that's what we're looking at. But the problem is that some people will get stuck in one of these states most of the time, or too far into that state. And when that's the case, that imbalance can create a wide variety of symptoms, problems, health issues, quote unquote, disease, all that kind of stuff. So when someone is in balance, we can usually help them straighten that out and balance that out a little bit. And then that can help the body stop those problems that are being created. So, like, for example, an anabolic imbalance where somebody's stuck in an anabolic state has the ability, it doesn't always, but it has the ability to magnify constipation issues. Because in that sleepy, sleepy time, I'm trying to make it really easy. Kelly Ray really wanted me to make it easy, I think. And that's why I kind of want to make it basic. Um, is during that anabolic sleepy, sleepy time, the body sends more of its water through the kidneys and not as much to the bowels. So that's fine. That's kind of part of what the body washing junk out through the kidneys is doing, all that stuff. But if somebody never moves out of that anabolic state into the catabolic state during the day, the water is always going through the kidneys. And so the stool will get more hard, and then it doesn't move as fast, and it can lead to constipation issues. Now, the other side of that is if someone's stuck in a catabolic state all the time, then the body's sending all the water to the bowels and not enough to the kidneys. And now they're shooting off the toilet like a rocket because all the water's going and their stool is really loose and they have diarrhea issues. So those are two possible issues with those imbalances. They don't always happen. If a person has a catabolic balance, they're not always going to have a loose stool. And same with an anabolic imbalance. They're not always going to be constipated. The other thing that's important is that there are other causes for chronic diarrhea and chronic constipation. It's not just those imbalances. So we kind of have to look at the whole picture. But today we're just going to kind of talk about some things that can happen when one of these imbalances occurs. You don't have to understand all of these things. You don't have to understand everything about the imbalance. If you just run the simple self-test, then you can get an idea if an imbalance occurs, and then you kind of look at the steps that can help improve that. You take those steps, and if the symptoms improve, you know you rock the house. How much of that made any sense to you, Nissa?
It made sense to me, but I have been following this for quite a while, so kind of get it.
Right. It's a repetition thing is what it does. But let's kind of answer some people's questions here, and then that'll allow us to dig a little bit deeper into this kind of stuff. But just know that with this particular imbalance, it's just a matter of the body getting stuck in one of its states or processes, or however you want to look at it, instead of moving back and forth like a body is supposed to do. Let's start with
Okay.
Sasha's question that she started off with.
And she said that it makes sense. So if it makes sense to her, it probably makes sense to everyone.
So we can shut it down then. So we'll see you guys next week. And don't forget to tip your waitresses.
All right. Speaking of Sasha, she did have our first question. And her question is, when you're doing the self-test, what if two markers against each side, like the urine pH of less than 6.1 and you wake easily equals catabolic, but then you have a saliva pH of less than 6.6 and you have constipation and that equals anabolic. It says no imbalance as equal, but still problems on the other side. So basically, when she's running her self-test, if she has markers of each side, which one should she look at?
Right. So we kind of look at different physiological markers like urine and saliva pH and blood pressure and breath rate and things like that. And then we also look at common symptoms that go along with these imbalances. And then we look at all those markers and we kind of check off what's going on with us. And if one side is like dominant, then that's a pretty good sign that there's an imbalance there. And so we want to put some attention towards that imbalance. But Sasha is saying that she's kind of even. And when things are kind of even, that kind of shows that there's probably a balance in that situation. Now, keep in mind that we're not using NASA equipment, and when people run their own tests, they're just looking at a few things. If you're working with a health coach, they might look at a few more things that give more clues. But if things are looking a little bit balanced, you might be balanced in those areas, or you're just not looking at enough markers, or maybe you appeared to be balanced in that moment, but if you checked your self-tests again, maybe in the evening or maybe the following day, you might see a pattern of, oh, I do tend to be leaning more anabolic, but maybe I am not always anabolic. Does that make sense? So I'm kind of letting people come in as they show up late too. So if I disappear or something, you know where I went. So CJ just jumped in. Hey, CJ. And so when we look at that, we have to consider that both of those other issues where she's saying that there's still issues there, like she's waking easily and there's constipation. Remember, both of those issues can be caused by other problems as well. Constipation can be caused by a lack of stomach acid. So the stool is not acidic enough to move at a good pace. When the stool is alkaline, it moves slower. Or maybe there's enough acid in the stomach, but the small intestines are very alkaline from some type of bacterial overgrowth. And the waste from that bacteria is very alkaline, and that's slowing the stool down. So it's possible that you could be balanced in this anabolic catabolic area, but have other causes for these other issues. Insomnia and hard time sleeping right, that can be caused by not enough electrolytes or nutrients in the system. That can be caused by someone being stuck in that fight or flight state most of the time. And so their body kind of feels like they're running from a lion all the time, and you're not going to be able to sleep then. So you really have to kind of look at the whole picture and not just look at the numbers and say this has this and why is that wrong. It's kind of like you got to kind of figure out what else might be going on. And Sasha, if you continue to watch those numbers, you're probably going to see, is it starting to lean one way more often than the other times, or is it not? And you'll start to get a better idea of what's going on.
And when people are looking at these numbers, you said that, like, maybe it can come from a anabolic imbalance, or maybe it can come from not enough stomach acid when we're talking about constipation. Do you usually see like one more than the other? Is it a 50-50 split? Just depends on the person.
When I see chronic constipation or chronic loose stool issues, a lot of times it's a combination of things that are all contributing to it. And that's why it's so bad. It's not just one thing. But if you're looking at all these things and everything is lined up on the anabolic side and you have constipation, well, you want to put a lot of attention towards improving that anabolic imbalance. If it's just a little bit, but you haven't pooped since May, then you're like, okay, I am going to put attention on this anabolic imbalance, but I probably want to put some attention on other possible causes for constipation as well.
Okay. Okay. And did you want me to move on to the next question?
Yeah, go on to the next question. And I can't remember if this was Sasha that asked this or if this was some.
This one was Candace.
This was part of Candace's question. Candace has multiple appearances on tonight's episode.
She does. All right.
This is the Candace show.
Asks, can a thyroid medication like Synthroid affect ketone readings? I used to get higher than a 0.5, and now the highest I've seen in quite a while is 0.7, and the only new thing is taking this med. She's happy with her weight loss this week, but wondering if staying steady at 0.5 millimoles is still considered fat adapted, or is there something preventing her from a more optimal number for continued weight loss?
So the answer to that is, I don't know. Next question.
That's not a very good answer.
That's not a good answer. We did hear with Stephanie right under that, didn't she say?
Yeah, Stephanie had a question too. She said, I have Hashimoto disease and have been on Synthroid. I don't think it's hindrance, at least for her. She said, hang in there.
Yeah, and I have not heard anything about that contributing to reducing any ketones. But anything that goes into the system that stresses the system has the ability to elevate stress hormones, which will cause the body to produce more glucose so that the body has energy to deal with whatever is stressing it out, and that can reduce ketones. So, how medications work is that they overwhelm the liver so that they can stay in the body, because the liver will remove anything that is synthetic or toxic or anything like that. And all drugs are synthetic man-made things, and there is no natural drug, because you can't uh, uh, patent a natural thing and then you can't make any money. So all drugs are synthetic, so they all stress the liver by, they had to kind of raise the dose of drugs in order to overwhelm the liver so enough of the drug can stay in the body and do the job it's supposed to do. So as the liver gets more and more overwhelmed and can't remove filth, that can be a stress to the body as well. So if you're really looking around about it, it has the ability to affect ketones, but it's not something that me or Nissa have really heard about. You haven't heard about anybody saying my Synthroid is affecting my ketones, have you?
Not necessarily ketones, but I have heard maybe it affects weight loss, the rate at which they lose weight.
Right. And of course, the liver is very important when we're looking at weight loss, because things that don't get removed from the body, not all things, but a lot of things have the ability to get stored in fat cells. And that makes our fat cells expand, and then our pants don't fit. So that is a possibility when you look at it that way. Um, so let's look a little bit deeper into Candace's numbers here. And I see some really good questions from Bree here. We're going to get into that here in a second too. But let's just continue on with the rest of what Candace said, because I had her look at some of her numbers. So this is a long one. Go at
Um,
it.
all right. So she said that she tested her ketones and they were great, 1.3. So maybe when we were just talking about, maybe she was testing too close to when she ate. But she did have some other symptoms that she wanted to ask about. She said she had hair loss and stubborn belly fat. She is shrinking everywhere but her belly, and she's concerned maybe menopause is getting in the way. She said her stool is good. She has no gas or bloating, and she's still taking beet flow, usually just one or two per meal.
Keep going. She has a longer thing. It kind of went long.
Yeah, this one, we're gonna be here for a second. Good questions though. All right, so here are some answers that you had questions for. She said for 20 years, she's been on and off antidepressants for anxiety medications, and she's trying to find the best for whatever life situations and imbalances were going on. Now, over the past 5 years, it became apparent her biggest issue was anxiety and overthinking more than depression. Perhaps it's even hormonal related at times. She never had any real panic attacks, just high anxiety. And she's been taking blood pressure medications for about 2 years. She has a combined tablet for blood pressure and fluid retention. I don't know how to say this. Candesartan
It's
and
just a medication name. Yeah.
Okay, HCTZ. Blood pressure at the time was ranging 154 over 103 and then 147 over 101 with terrible forehead headaches. Her cholesterol, she was on cholesterol meds for well over 10 years. The LDL were not high, but the HDL were too low. Some of the other supplements she takes in addition to beet flow include apple cider vinegar, digestive enzymes, combo B6, B12, folic acid, CoQ10, omega-3, and turmeric. She purchased vitamin K2 but hasn't taken it yet. And after seeing a video that suggested if you should take CoQ10 and cholesterol meds, if it's a good idea, she wanted to look further into that before taking those. And then she had a fasting blood glucose last October after her first challenge. It was 106.2, but was also warned by her doctor that this was pre diabetic numbers. By March, she was at 99. And then her last physical this past July, she was all the way back up to 115, and she was being pretty strict with keto. So she said today's number was a nice surprise. the thyroid meds that she's been on for over a year with a recent dose increase just in late August or early September, but she hasn't gotten any labs back for that. Um, and I think that's
Yeah.
the end of her.
So she posted an image of her numbers too, and so we see her urine pH is 5 and her saliva pH is 6, which is very low. We don't want to ever see saliva pH below 6.5. That's a sign that the system is toxic, bile is not flowing, or something else is making the system toxic, which medications will do. So if somebody's on more than one or two medications, you're almost always going to see saliva pH uh, at least a little bit low. And then her breath rate was 14 and her blood pressure 111. So an important thing to understand is that it is very common to see someone who's been on antidepressants or anxiety medications for a long time to end up being put on blood pressure lowering medications because we see anxiety and depression with people with very low blood pressure because there's not enough minerals in the system for all the signals to travel correctly from the body to the brain and from the brain back to the body again. So the body is not functioning optimally. And so the person experiences that as depression, or the body's freaking out because there's not any resources, and the person will experience anxiety. Um, an anabolic imbalance can also create anxiety because the way that we create energy in that state is called fermentation, and that creates a lot of lactic acid. And a high level of lactic acid will create anxiety. So they give them these meds that restrict the ability for them to pee out their salts. And so more salts stay in the system, thicken up the blood, raise the blood pressure, and then it allows the person to function a little bit. So now they function and like, wow, these drugs are amazing. And then they stay on them for years because, wow, there's no way I'm going to go off of that. I was a train wreck before. And so blood pressure goes up and up and up until they say, oh, now you need to lower your blood pressure. We're going to give you this drug that lowers your blood pressure. So you have these two drugs fighting against each other and arguing nonstop about where the blood pressure should be. So it would be like having, like a racing team. Like maybe you owned a racing team and you spent millions of dollars on this car to make it as fast as possible and millions of dollars training this guy to drive amazingly. But he gets in the car and he slams his foot on the gas and the brake at the same time. So how do you think that's going to go? It's not going to go well. And that's kind of what can be going on in the body when these drugs are kind of battling against each other. Not to mention that a person is also, you know, doing two drugs working against each other, which is doubling the amount of burden that the liver is receiving. Now, understand that under no way am I saying that to stop any of your drugs. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not telling you to do that. I can't tell you to do that. Uh, but I have heard from people who said that what they did in these situations is they adjusted their dose. Some of them talked to their doctor, and their doctor said, "No, are you crazy? These are doing things." They don't understand what's going on. They just know what symptoms that the drugs affect. That's the education that they're given. So those are the pieces of information that they use. But I've heard from people who have on their own kind of reduced both of the meds at the same time and then watch their blood pressure every single day. Every single day you're looking at it and you're adjusting what you're doing to make sure that something is not going too low or too high. Because I mean, the reality is if one drug is making your blood pressure high enough to relieve that depression and anxiety, then maybe it would achieve the same goal by just using less of it. It's gotten to the point where you've used so much that the blood pressure is now too high. What would happen if you just use less of it and the blood pressure became into a range that was beneficial? So that's something to kind of think about. Does that make any sense, Nissa?
Yes, and I just want to repeat that he's not telling you to stop your medications because you always need to work with your doctor on bringing that down. But if you have a stubborn doctor that doesn't want to do that, maybe you need to find a new doctor.
Yeah, you could do that, and I am allowed to share things that I have the people have told me that they did successfully. and we're
Yeah.
able to get off the meds by doing those things successfully. Um, so that's one thing to consider. When we look at other things like the apple cider vinegar you're using, that would be really great to use to fill your trash can. You could put that right in your trash can and then not use that anymore, because that's really pro-anabolic. And somebody who was dealing with anxiety that could have come from an anabolic imbalance, I hate to see them do that. Um, Now your pH, your urine pH is low, but so is your saliva pH. So they're still close together, and that's still kind of an anabolic marker for you. And the B6 and the B12, those are great because they can improve an anabolic imbalance. Um, Folic acid, we don't really use that anymore. We use folate uh, because there's a lot of downsides to folic acid, and plus that's pro-anabolic. But if you wanted to use some, you would want to use some type of folate, and that would get better results. And omega-3 is great for an anabolic imbalance, but it also is going to make a person more insulin resistant. So we have stopped using fatty acids altogether to correct imbalances like we used to do, because it just seems that they help inflammation in the short term and create more inflammation in the long term is kind of what we're finding that they do. So this whole everybody needs flaxseed oil thing from 10 years ago, it didn't turn out to be accurate. But your fasting glucose is starting to come down, and that's great. That's what you want. And you've been on keto a little bit, and that's allowing you to become less insulin resistant. So that's really a big deal. Now for the other, because we have Carrie who had some questions about that she read that keto was devil for your thyroid. Um, we see that Candace's breath rate is 14, which is in a good range. We like to see that, because if breath rate goes too low, that can be problematic for the thyroid. And keto has the ability to lower breath rate. So that's where science is finding this piece of information of a broad stroke of keto is bad for thyroid. We could also say a broad stroke of every carbohydrate is bad for your pancreas, because for some people, carbohydrates are very bad for a lot of things. But we don't want to use broad strokes. We want to look at the person. So if you're worried about thyroid issues, check your breath rate and see if you have more than 12 or 13 inhales per minute. You're just counting the inhales. And that's going to give you an idea, not really of how your thyroid is working, but if you have enough CO2 in the system to convert that T4 to T3 or the other way around, whatever it is. In other words, your thyroid functioning correctly. You want your breath rate to be in that 14 to 18 range, and Candace's is. So that's a great sign that she at least has that going for her. What else did I leave out? Candace?
Um,
She's reading, she's typing things.
yeah, she said that she is slowly weaning herself from the anxiety meds, so that's a good sign.
Right. So just keep in mind that if you reduce one, then and you're keeping the blood pressure lowering drugs at the same pace, then your blood pressure is going to go too low and create anxiety and depression for a totally different reason. Does that make sense? So you really, if you're going to mess with your meds, you really want to look at your blood pressure every day and kind of keep an eye on that.
And so you also answered Carrie's question in there when she said that she read that fasting and eating low carb or keto can be bad for your thyroid. Is this true or false? And you're saying it depends on the person,
Right.
right?
It really does. And in our courses, if you're a Keto Decoded member and you go through the courses, then we teach about imbalances that keto can create, because any diet can create imbalances in one way or the other. And if you're a person that's already has a severe issue with that imbalance and you start doing keto, then you can magnify that. And that's what we teach in the courses, how to look at your physiology and know where trouble might lie. And then steps you can take to fix that so that you can succeed with keto if that's what you want to do. It's just a matter of working with your body instead of saying, my friend lost weight on keto, so by cracky, I'm gonna too. Because that's not how it works. If you're not set up to thrive on keto, it's going to be a real problem.
Okay. And I know fasting in general, like if you overfast, like you hardly eat anything and you're just, not eating enough to function. That's definitely not going to be good for thyroid. But what about if you're eating enough in your fasting window? Is it usually an issue?
If you're eating and you're fasting, well, it's a lot about the stress hormones again. If somebody's in ketosis, we find that they do better with a fasting window. They do better using IF if they're in ketosis. But if minerals and resources are really low, the window of optimal may be shorter for that person. You know what I mean? If everything is going great for a person, those are the people who are like, yeah, I ate last week, I'm doing great, kind of thing. They can fast longer if everything is going well, but most people just can't get away with that. Did I
Yeah.
answer that question, or did I just make up a question and answer something different?
No, that was it. We're good.
Okay, we're going to have to cut this off here, and we'll pick it up again next week, where we'll answer more of these questions from our challengers and dig a little deeper into imbalances that show up with keto. But if you haven't done one of our keto challenges and you want to get on the list for the next time we do it, just go to eatingfatisthenewskinny.com/challenge list, and you can get on that waiting list to be the first to get invited next time we do that. So stick around. We do probably about 3 a year. So just get on that list and you'll be able to do it. If you need to see any of the show notes that we talked about, any of the links, just go to chatthefat.com/episode 81. And we'll see you guys next week.
Whether you're brand new to keto or just looking to move past roadblocks, join us for our next Troubleshooting Keto Master Workshop. Go to chatthefat.com/workshop to find upcoming dates and register for this totally free event. You just might find your missing piece of the puzzle. Until then, we'll see you next week on Chat the Fat.